Let the word go forth.
Fool me once.
Are you fired up?
I'm not a crook.
Are you ready to go?
Shame on you.
It's Abe Lincoln's Top Hat, hosted by Ben Kissel.
Fool me, we can't get fooled again.
Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Ben Kissel, as always, with Marcus Parks.
Hey, Ben.
How are you, Marcus?
I'm doing good. I got a tooth pulled this week, but it's doing okay.
I know. We have to apologize. There won't be a last podcast on the left coming out this week because Marcus's mouth is dysfunctional, like the United States government. Think about it. We have to thank everybody in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Of course.
Holy hell. I don't know if they have water in St. Paul because all I saw was booze. It was insane. And it was such a wonderful experience, a wonderful time. I got to hang out with some old college friends. Mm-hmm. I did not apologize for doing anything wrong to them when I was in college because as soon as I saw them, I realized why I did. They're schmucks. They're a bunch of schmucks. They got me far too intoxicated.
Oh, man. Were telling me stories backstage about you in college, and it was 3 consecutive stories involving knives.
Oh, my God. Well, you got to have fun sometimes. And certainly knife play. I'm surprised they still have all of my digits. It's incredible. That was a wonderful time. Halfway through the second show at St. Paul, I took a shot on stage. And you know when you have the final shot of your night? Uh-huh. But then imagine being on stage in front of 300 people. And then I felt like Glenn Campbell up there in his latest tour when he had Alzheimer's. I was smiling. The lights were on. But, oh, my God, the family fled because they lived in Aleppo.
Oh, we all have our uh-oh moments. Like, you take that shot, like, uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
And then I was just looking at Henry and Marcus as they slowly became more and more like Britney Spears in a music video with just stars around their faces. And I was like, look at those majestic boys. Oh, I'm on stage. Oh, my God. But that was a wonderful time, and we had a good time talking politics after the show with a bunch of people. I got a lot of great messages. I also want to thank everyone who's been emailing in for the dumpster fire chats. Email me at benk721@gmail.com, and I'm going to read as many as possible. Thank you so much for supporting that show. This show, it's the same show.
It's the same show.
One is done in a closet, and this is done in the back room of a Mexican restaurant, our beautiful creek in the cave. So we've got a lot to get to.
A lot.
Donald Trump gave his first speech in front of a joint sessions in front of Congress, a joint session. So obviously we have Republicans and we have Democrats, and the Republicans said, we love everything you're doing, and the Democrats said, we love some of the things you're doing. So it was a big winner for Donald Trump because the bar was exceptionally low, and the man only had to go on stage and not act like a gorilla in the zoo and throw dung all over the crowd. He had to act like a human being. He had to act mildly presidential. And I suppose he did that.
I guess, okay, yes, he was able to read in front of a crowd very well. Good fucking job.
And he also understood the importance of political props, and I don't want to be demeaning whatsoever to the wife of the soldier who died in the Yemen raid, a raid that yielded very little intelligence, despite what the administration says about it yielding a massive amount of important intelligence that's going to protect our country. He was a hero. He was a wonderful he died for this country. He died doing what he loved to do, which was to serve his country. His wife was there in Congress, and she got a huge applause break. Donald Trump is finding out how to use those people for his political gain.
His name was William Ryan Owens.
Okay, and so thank you for your service, and rest in peace, of course. A wonderful human being. We're not discrediting him whatsoever. But Donald Trump is now learning the tricks of the presidency.
Yeah, but he's learning the tricks of the presidency, but he's not learning them well because earlier that day, he did not take responsibility for the death of the soldier. He said that it was on his generals that the guy died. And I will say this about Obama is that he always took responsibility for when a soldier died. Hell, he took responsibility for Benghazi. He took full and total responsibility for Benghazi. And when the commander-in-chief does not take responsibility for his decisions and does not take responsibility for the death of his soldiers, that is telling his soldiers that he does not have their back.
Marcus, I'm going to have to put on my disagreement cap. When it came to Benghazi, let's not forget they blamed it on a video, the innocence of Muslims.
They did, but a couple of months later,
let's not say that he took full responsibility of Benghazi.
Okay.
They knew it was quite a kerfluffle because of the invasion that Hillary Clinton Clinton had, navigated and set into action when it comes to ousting Gaddafi
That
there
is
in
true.
Libya.
But in October, he said, I am ultimately responsible for what's taking place there because these are my folks, and I'm the one who has to greet these coffins when they come home. But Donald Trump came right out. But there's a difference between saying, okay, maybe it was some sort of like bullshit video. Okay, that's bullshit completely.
Nonsense. Absolute nonsense.
That's nonsense. That's absolute nonsense.
Valerie Jarrett was out there spouting those lies.
Yeah, and those were lies, and that was absolute nonsense. But Donald Trump came right out and said, this wasn't my fault. And you know what? He wasn't there. He wasn't in the room when that decision was being made. He was off tweeting. He was not there, and he is not taking responsibility. And, of course, yes, Obama, Benghazi, I'm sorry I even fucking brought it up.
Oh, my, don't even get me going on Benghazi. It was very sad.
But still, Donald Trump did not take responsibility for this, and that was one of the huge complaints the Republicans always has, that Obama does not have the military's back. He does not support the military, and Donald Trump in his first 40 days is coming out and saying, this isn't my responsibility. And I'm not a part of this.
And we're going to get into the Russia situation with Jeff Sessions, obviously on the heels of Michael Flynn being fired as National Security Advisor, and just what is going on with the Russians. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on in the episode. But with that context, it is interesting thinking about the media, Obama, and the media under Donald Trump, specifically in that Yemen raid. Roughly 30 civilians were killed, including the child, the daughter of the first U.S. Citizen killed overseas as well, a man who went over there to fight for ISIS. I'm blanking on his name. I would mispronounce it anyway. But to that point, yes, that was a total botched raid. There is no denying that did not go nearly as well as planned. But, of course, Donald Trump said it was A+. It was a perfect raid and everything went according to plan, which it might have, because Steve Bannon was like, we'll kill 30 innocents. Let's do the raid that way. You know, everyone's killing the bad guys. What if we let them live and we kill the good guys?
Yeah.
Have we ever thought about doing that, Donald?
I mean, there's one thing about honoring a widow during joint sessions. It's another thing when earlier that day you take zero responsibility for it. And it's also another thing to honor that widow while lying about it. While completely and totally lying about what happened in that raid and what was actually yielded in that raid.
So let's go through a little bit about what he actually discussed in the address to Congress. He has a new policy plan called Voice. Now, this seems a little bit odd to me. Basically, it's a tactic of ratting out your neighbor, or a tactic what this is for people who were victimized by immigrants.
It's called Voice Victims of Immigration Crime Engagement.
Okay, so now if you really want to take any group of the population and target them and exploit all of the crimes that have happened with members of said group, the Polish are the worst people on earth, or tall people are the worst people on earth. You could make this about anyone, and of course, what he is doing is isolating immigrants because those are the boogeyman of our times, according to Donald Trump.
Yeah, and this right here, not to get too hyperbolic on it, but the Nazis did the exact same thing with the Jewish population. They published a pamphlet in which they listed all of the Jewish criminals, all the Jews that have been accused of crimes in Germany, and Donald Trump is about to do the exact same thing. He's about to start publishing the list, the names of immigrants who have committed crimes in order to stoke fear. This does not serve any other purpose. I cannot see a purpose for this other than to stoke fear. I don't know how this is defensible in the least bit.
Well, and now, of course, we have the situation where he is beginning to go after dreamers. Her name is... Let's see. Her name is Daniela Vargas. She was a dreamer. She came here at 7 years old from Argentina. Her DACA application had expired. You have to renew it every 2 years. It had expired, and she went to speak about immigration and the U.S. immigration policies. She went to give a public speech about it. Her father is currently detained, waiting to be deported. Her brother is currently detained, waiting to be deported. After the speech, where she was discussing the issues with immigration in this nation, she was followed by members of ICE. Of course, it's an extension of law enforcement. ICE. It's not a military. It's not a part of the U.S. military, despite the fact that Donald Trump said it was a military, executed like a fine-tuned military machine.
They're part of the Department of Homeland Security.
So she was followed. She was then arrested, and this is the second DACA kid I can recall now. The first one They proclaimed he was a gang member. He said he was not. Now, Daniela, we know for a fact she is not participating in gang activity. She's not a bad hombre, as Donald Trump likes to call them. She is a U.S. citizen, been here since she was 7 years old, and for all intents and purposes, doing every single thing that an above-average American woman would do.
Well, it's like I said a few weeks ago when he made his first statement about the DACA kids. What he was saying is, we're not coming for you yet, and now that time has come. They are now coming for the DACA kids.
But if you listen to the speech, it's very interesting because he does have a much softer tone when he's talking about DACA. You know, the good ones get to stay, whatever the good ones are. It's a very, it's vague. I say vague, but it's very broad. What is a good one to Donald Trump?
Yeah.
I believe anyone who is here illegally is not a good one.
Yeah.
The 11 million undocumented workers, it doesn't matter what they have done wrong or what they have done right. In my opinion, when this administration says the good ones get to stay, the bad ones get to go, anyone who is here illegally is a bad one.
Yeah.
And so I think the mass deportation, those will be happening. Those will continue to happen. And it is nice that the media is finally paying attention to them.
Yeah, after Obama deported more people than any other president out there.
And as Donald Trump loves to break records, which was the record that was broken with the applause given to the widow of the great soldier who passed away in Yemen in the Yemen raid. I mean, I thought that was so unbelievable that he patted himself on the back to some degree for having the longest applause break.
Oh, he did.
In congressional history, which we don't know because no one's holding Guinness Book of World Records isn't there in the front row. Be like, when do they stop clapping? When do they start? That was the longest, Donald, the longest applause break ever for a widow dead in a raid caused by a president's, complete and utter lack of understanding of how to, operate.
Yeah, lack of understanding and lack of care. He didn't give a shit about that raid. All he wanted was an operation. He did not sign off on it. He did not have any knowledge whatsoever of whether it would work or not. He did not give a shit.
But, and
now he's pretending like he gives a fuck.
Well, because it helps him politically.
Yeah, and it is extremely disrespectful to that widow. It is extremely disrespectful to that woman, and it's extremely disrespectful to the memory of that soldier.
You know, the soldier was probably, I mean, I don't know the political affiliation of the soldier, but we can't say that. I mean, this is sort of, it goes with the job. That soldier knew what he was getting into, and the wife, she did seem to be truly moved. But there is something about honoring individuals who have sacrificed and given their all for this country. There is no denying that. And so we can't lose sight of that. It's just Donald Trump lies so much about small things, about big things. It's hard to take him seriously. It's hard to find any sincerity in his actual concern, like you were saying, for the passing away of this great soldier. So, what else was discussed in this speech? Many other things.
The one thing that really bothers me about this entire speech, how much money is all this shit going to cost?
Well, he asked
how
for
is he
$1 trillion
for this.
$1 trillion for infrastructure, and that's a fairly liberal idea,
It's all very liberal.
And, of course, he does want to expand the government. There's no denying that. And it's interesting watching the Republicans, Paul Ryan and Mike Pence, sit behind him. They applaud on the immigration things, and they applaud on, financing the military, getting the military more money. But they don't applaud on TPP or on NAFTA or those sorts of things. So Donald Trump still does have that, and that's the classic populism of Donald Trump, where he distances himself from the Republican Party. And, of course, that ties into Russia and the complete and utter confusion in the Republican Party regarding how to react to the Russians' involvement with the Trump campaign and with the Trump administration.
And to give him some credit, the paid family leave thing is a pretty big deal.
That was put in there by Ivanka.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
Well, I can give him, credit where credit is due. That is a good thing. That's something that people have wanted for a long time now. So if I can give him one check mark on the whole thing. Oh, so that check mark, that thing that I like, wasn't even put in there by him?
Well, I mean, he still read it off the teleprompter very well, by the way.
But it was Ivanka's idea.
That's been Ivanka's thing the whole time.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Good for her. So good for Ivanka.
Yeah, and I mean, she is, the more that Ivanka can be in President Trump's ear as opposed to Steve Bannon or Stephen Miller, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
There's no denying that. So, yes, it was an interesting speech. It was, It was, if you are an anti-Trumper, which I think many people are listening, it was something to be slightly concerned about. If he can project a presidential tone that's going to be, that's going to go very far for him. Because I think at the end of the day, if you look at his approval ratings amongst Republicans, it's 85%. It's much lower than that, obviously, with Democrats. It's in the 30s, which I thought was actually still fairly high in a strange way. If he can present himself like a president, there's going to be some interesting times to come. And I mean, as far as impeachment goes, there's a lot. I did a great little town hall yesterday called "Demystifying Government." A lot of the people there were left-leaning individuals. They wanted impeachment for either the emoluments clause or the collusion with the Russians. I don't think impeachment's going to happen. Even if you impeach, that's a totally different situation than actual removal from office.
Yeah, Clinton was impeached.
Exactly. And the only president to be impeached closely was Andrew Johnson, and then of course Nixon. He would have been impeached, but he's like, I'm out of here. I've had enough. So he just dipped town. It's very difficult to impeach. I equated it to trying to win a 9-inning baseball game by hitting home runs in the first inning. It's just not going to happen. It's going to be a slow burn to fight some of the policies that Donald Trump wants to put out there. It's just going to be it's going to require activism and really kind of boots on the streets of Washington and protest and things like that. Specifically when it comes to Jeff Sessions and his desire to go after states that legalized marijuana, or at the very least stop the expansion of legalized marijuana throughout the country. Jeff Sessions, let's move on to him now. The current Attorney General also possibly had conversations with the Russians, which, these people are very high up. They have conversations with these other individuals on a regular basis. That in itself might not be the largest deal, but a bigger deal is he lied in front of Congress during the confirmation hearings.
Well, it's not a big deal for Jeff Sessions at all. He was a part of the Armed Services Committee. Those people talk to everybody. I mean, they have a lot of conversations with other countries. So it's not a big deal that Jeff Sessions talked to Russia. It's a big deal that he lied about it, especially in light of Michael Flynn. When you have so many people in this administration having some collusion, or not necessarily even collusion, having some communication with the Russians. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves on this. Some communication with the Russians. The question is, why are they lying about it? What do they have to hide? They would not be lying about it if they did not have something to hide.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
That's what I'm thinking. Of course. The Russian scandal is absolutely fascinating. And, if you look at Vladimir Putin, he has been allowed to do as well as he has done because of foreign intervention by the United States for the past 16 years that has left the Middle East in absolute shambles. And he's basically just filled the vacuum that was created when first of all, when Bush went in, destroyed the whole damn place, and when Obama left, the vacuum was filled by the Russians. And I had an opportunity to talk about this at length yesterday at this conference. And it's really interesting if you look at the United States and in Russia. So, I mean, just really briefly with the, I'm not Saman or Bobby. Believe it or not, I'm not him. But we got the Bolshevik Revolution, 1917, 1918. Lenin comes in, yada, 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 World War II, yada, yada to World War I. I just want to make that clear. I did yada, yada that. World War II, FDR sits down with Joseph Stalin. They actually had a fairly cordial relationship, which is an uncomfortable truth. We got along with the Russians during World War II, obviously.
We had to.
Truman went in and actually met after FDR. Truman sat down with Stalin and talked to him about how the war was going to end very soon. He's like, we got a big surprise. And Stalin didn't react because he's like, yeah, I know. You got the bomb, right? you guys paid the Nazi scientists more money than we were going to pay them, so you got them, and then you got to make the bomb. I see. Okay. So, and then basically as soon as the war ended, it ended with the Eastern Front and Berlin. And the U.S. wanted Berlin, and Russia wanted Berlin, and that's the Cold War, and that's when it began.
Well, I mean, it's much more complicated.
Much more complicated.
Yeah. I mean, it was also played in with Harry Truman, Secretary of State, that really fucked that. I mean, Harry Truman is the man that fucked up our relationship with Russia and began the Cold War.
Well, I think the Cold War was just simply going to begin because the realignment of the geopolitical world was totally. Everything was off kilter now.
Yeah, it could have been prevented. It absolutely could have. We could have worked with the Russians, and it could have been prevented. But Harry Truman and his Secretary of State said, "Fuck you."
I don't know if we want to be working with the Russians. I mean, the Russians weren't exactly trying to give us a hug at that time. But we go back, and so now let's go to the 90s, right? So we have Boris Yeltsin in there after, the Russians were doing fairly well up to that point. Now, Boris Yeltsin dissolves the Soviet Union. It dissolves underneath him. I mean, it was going to happen. It was inevitable. Putin absolutely hated that. I mean, that was his whole thing. He was with the KGB at the time. He thought that was the biggest tragedy that's ever happened. 1999, we've talked about this many times. The Chechnyan apartment bombings, they blamed it on the Chechnyans. It was the KGB, which is now the FSB. It was them that started it. Putin ran on a platform to basically make Russia great again. He wanted to get back the Soviet Union. And through 16 years of U.S. foreign policy, he's been able to not accomplish his goals, but take steady steps to accomplishing those goals. What happens in the Baltic now? With he's trying to get Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia back. That's the Baltic bloc, and then of course with the annexing of Crimea, which Obama allowed for, and going into Ukraine, which Obama did not stop when he said that he would. So we have two presidents in a row that are facilitating Putin's strides to bring the Soviet Union back, and now we have a perfect storm of events that leads to Donald Trump's presidency running a very nationalistic campaign, much like Putin did. Instead of Chechnyans, it's immigrants, it's Muslims. It's the exact same recipe for nationalistic success. And nationalistic, I mean, obviously Donald Trump being an economic nationalist, and America first. It's very Putin-esque. So it makes sense to me when you listen to Donald Trump talk about Vladimir Putin, when you listen to the respect that he has for Vladimir Putin, if you look at Putin's rise to power, it is the template that Donald Trump used.
Populism.
It's populism, but it's also tied into this us against them narrative. We've been screwed over for so long. This country was great. Now it's not great. Let's make it great again. All of those sorts of things it forms just such a perfect narrative for Donald Trump. And I think as he took from different sort of political figures throughout the primary, I mean, he would change his tone. Bernie Sanders was talking about TPP. Next thing you know, Donald Trump is talking about TPP. Bernie Sanders talking about, rebuilding the middle class and even going after the 1%. I mean, Donald Trump had very hard rhetoric when it comes to like Wall Street and things like that. Obviously, none of that will ever come to fruition. Wall Street is going to be doing just fine under a President Donald Trump.
Wall Street is breaking records under Donald Trump.
And now
everyone's pointing towards that as some sort of great victory. And it's a great victory for Wall Street, but how many of you motherfuckers are involved in that?
Well, maybe I don't have enough money to invest. I would invest in.
How many of you motherfuckers out there listening have enough money to invest? How many of you are actually benefiting from that?
Can you invest in just like the left Twix? Because I always like the left Twix better than the right Twix. I always eat the left one first. I don't know why. So of course we have this strange collaboration happening with Donald Trump in America, taking from some of Putin's playbook. Of course, talking about even when he was having that conversation with Bill O'Reilly, discussing how the United States is no saint, we're no angel, equating us, putting us on the same level as a Russia when it comes to the terrible, nefarious things that Vladimir Putin did in order to become elected. And of course, he just hasn't left, which is a horror. I mean, Russia was a democracy at that point. When Putin was elected, he was not supposed to stay there forever.
No.
He just Bloomberged it, and he's just like, I'll just do another term. And his approval ratings are exceptionally high.
Very high.
In Russia. And not a lot of people realize that. He's crushing it. If you're Vladimir Putin, you are the happiest politician on the global stage. You are this is the happiest a Russian politician has been since Gorbachev was too drunk to remember that he was Russian.
Well, if you go to Russia, you can see Putin merchandise everywhere. Someone sent us a Vladimir Putin calendar.
It's
that
good, too.
It's great. It's very worshipful.
It is.
It's very worshipful.
And that goes back to that story that we heard when Donald Trump gave his speech in Palm Beach with the person that he brought on stage, and the reporter said, "What did Donald Trump tell you when he brought you on stage?" He said, "He told me I was great."
Yeah.
He told me I was great. And then that man has a 6-foot cutout of Donald Trump, and he looks at it every day and salutes it.
Yeah.
It's very German. It's very Russian. It's dictatorial, right?
It really is. And I think the Russians, what's really coming out now is I think what America did through that 16 years, I think we forgot how smart Russia is.
Oh, my goodness. Absolutely.
Russians are extremely intelligent people.
They've got one mode, and it is go. Has not anyone seen Rocky IV? It's just go, go, go.
Yeah, the Russians set us up. We're really starting. I think what we're seeing right now is I think we're starting to see the fruits of Russia's labor, all the seeds that they planted last year, all of these politicians that are in Donald Trump's cabinet that are now, for some reason, very afraid to talk about their conversations with the Russians. And
absolutely.
I think that the Russians, with the DNC hacks, and now that it's coming out, all of these people that were involved either directly or indirectly with Trump's campaign, now it's coming out that they were having all these conversations with them last year, and all of this is to sow chaos. It's all to breed it's all to breed a loss of confidence in the American people in their government, and it's happening. It is absolutely happening, and it's causing a lot of people to lose confidence, but it's also causing a lot of others to double down. It's causing a lot of people to really double down their support for Donald Trump, because if there's one thing that Americans hate, it's being made to look like an idiot. If there's one thing that Americans hate, it's admitting that they were wrong.
It is interesting. Of course, you have John McCain and Lindsey Graham. They just gave a press conference or a town hall yesterday on CNN. CNN is loving these town halls. They can't get enough of them.
Oh, they're into it.
They're absolutely befuddled by all of this. The Republican Party is completely confused. The hawks of that party who have lived through the Cold War, who have seen what the Russians have done, can't understand how, as a nation, we are willing to allow a Republican president to have such close ties with the Russians. So let's go back to Michael Flynn. Of course, 2014, he was fired from Barack Obama's campaign or administration because he continually called Islam a political affiliation as opposed to a religion. And of course, when you equate it to a political affiliation, the Constitution's out the window, and there are no more religious freedoms.
Yeah.
Yes, so that's with Michael Flynn there in 2014.
Well, I mean, really, if you listen to Donald Trump's speech, one of the big things that I noticed was he put a period after every word in radical Islamic terrorism.
Right.
He put punches on each of those. He put buttons on every single one of those words because he wanted to make sure, he wanted to really drive home what his opinion was and what his stance is on Islam. That was a dog whistle there.
And he did not mention Russia one time. The new National Security Advisor, McMaster's, does not want him to use the terms radical Islamic terrorism.
No.
But of course he still is. Anyway, what I was trying to get to there, December 26th, when Obama had the sanctions placed upon the Russians after they found out they were colluding with the campaign, with the Trump campaign, which the sanctions, by the way, were fairly minimal. It just closed 2 Russian compounds, one in Maryland and one in New York, and they expelled 35 Russian diplomats who they believed were tinkering with the elections and things like that. What we have there is Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, talking about how finally Barack Obama has been strong against the Russians. Paul Ryan literally said, it's been 8 years of horrendous U.S. foreign policy regarding the Russians. It's about time Obama got tough. Far too late. Too little, too late. They chastised Obama for the sanctions not being strong enough. We have Michael Flynn then immediately talking with the Russians about how the sanctions will be lifted, which is, we know this. But the Republican Party now is following a man who is Hillary on steroids when it comes to being friendly with the Russians. Hillary, of course, also wanted to do a restart with the Russians, but Donald Trump is straight up allowing this country to become allies with the Russians. And at no point did Hillary's restart, from my understanding of it, entail an actual relationship in an ally form. So the Republican Party is completely confused, and they really have nowhere to go with it regarding the U.S. and Russian relations, and they don't know what the next step should be regarding the U.S. and Russia. You could argue, is it bad to have a friendship with Russia? This is the stance of the Trump administration, and it was what the Republicans accused Barack Obama of being, was friends with the Russians. Of course, he wasn't. Is that a bad thing?
I don't think it's a bad thing to have a good relationship with Russia. But I don't think we should have a cozy relationship with Russia.
But right now, it's about as cozy as it could. It's the coziest it's ever been in our lifetime, and probably again since FDR met with Stalin, since we were fighting the Nazis. Believe it or not, that's a good reason to come together to fight Nazis.
Yeah, and the reason why we have cozy relationships with countries like, say, for example, England and Canada is because we can trust those countries. We know they're not going to try to fuck us over. We can't trust the Russians. We can have a good relationship with them, but we can't be cozy with them. I really don't. I don't believe that Putin is into having a mutually beneficial relationship with America. I just don't believe that.
I mean, that's what happened now. So once that vacuum was created in Syria, and the Russians were able to come over there and really do our dirty. It's so ironic to me that we have the Iranians are the devil and everybody hates them, and the Russians for the longest time were the Red Scare and Red Dawn, and they're coming to invade our country and make us all disgusting socialists and communists. They are the ones fighting the war for us when it comes to ISIS, and so the U.S. has benefited greatly from the Russian military. I mean, Assad is still in power. Yes, we didn't want him in power, but of course the red line that he crossed when he started to use chemical warfare, and of course the insurgents and the rebels were also using chemical weapons. It's an absolute nightmare what's happening in Syria right now. The Russians are really one of the more stabilizing factions in that region. So it's the whole country, the whole world is at a crossroads when it comes to these relationships, these strange relationships. ISIS is not nearly as powerful as the Nazis. They're not going to take over, the Middle East in nearly an effective way as the Nazis were able to take over the majority of Europe. But they are, in the eyes of many people, just as horrifying.
Yeah. Well, I think the conundrum that Republicans and Democrats, I think everybody in Congress right now, I think how they've been governing for the last couple of decades is they govern to get elected. They don't govern for the good of the American people. And I think right now, nobody knows how to govern anymore because they don't know how to govern to get elected, because they don't know which way the American people are swaying. So that's, I think, why they're so confused, because they're torn between how do we govern to stay in power? They don't know how to govern for the good of the American people.
Well, and I think that's why when we see the Republicans at these town halls, they're being, it's like it's like Def Jam comedy. The crowds are just screaming at them, but they're not encouraging them to tell another joke or anything like that. I mean, they're livid.
Yeah.
But this is where the confusion comes in also when it comes to Russia and the United States and the Trump administration. He's kind of more liberal on these stances. Although Russia, it's obviously, it's going back to the playbook that Putin had to create I believe it's an oligarchy. Getting rid of the media, getting rid of private companies, oil companies, things like that, and just completely murdering any of his adversaries. If you look at what Donald Trump has been doing, and we can talk about the media a little bit because I want to get into that subject also. It's on the tip of everybody's tongue. Trump is attempting to go down that road.
He wants
of muting the media. But I want to hear your thoughts on that because I'm conflicted on the entire thing.
You're conflicted on Donald Trump keeping people out of the press gaggle?
Well, the press gaggle, so we didn't allow the New York Times or CNN, right? So they are not the media, right? These are two entities. These are two private corporations that have reporters, and yes, they do. They are journalists, but what is media? Right? Is Twitter media, Facebook media? There are so many different kinds of media, and I think a lot of times when people talk about Barack Obama kicked Fox News out, that is technically media of the White House press room, although he later allowed them in once the backlash was too strong from other media outlets. Trump is opening the doors to other forms of media. I mean, obviously they are outlets that are more kind to him in their reporting, such as, InfoWars, which is absolutely insane that they are a relevant entity now. Mm-hmm. But so it's weird to me now when it comes to like CNN and those things, New York Times. Those are media entities, but they are not the media as a whole. I think there is more information now than ever before. So I do think there's a little bit of a misnomer happening when he's like he wants to shut down the media. Because there's more information, again, than ever before, and there are more people speaking than ever before. It's easier than ever to be a journalist in a lot of ways. You can citizen journalism, they call it.
Well, just because people are talking a lot, that doesn't mean they're saying anything.
Well, that's true.
I mean, you need to have people in there that are professionals. I think having citizen journalists is extremely important. It is absolutely extremely important. But I think you also need to have people in there that know what they're doing. thing.
Right, of
and
course,
I think Donald Trump, he's just what he's trying to do. He's trying to remove anybody who does not agree with him, who does not treat him who does not treat Sean Spicer nice.
Well, then CNN should definitely be back in the room. They are in the room, but in that gaggle, they were not allowed there because they were unbelievably kind with his speech in front of Congress. I mean, Van Jones, he took a lot of flack from the left. Of course, he is more of a left-leaning individual because he said this was the first time he became president of the United States. All these people got extremely upset with him, but their coverage was exceptionally kind.
Yeah, and they didn't talk about voice, and they didn't talk about any of the negative stuff. And I think this might be CNN swinging too far to the other side. I think
they want access.
Yeah, I think they want access, and I think it's also them saying like, okay, well, we have to report something good about Donald Trump, so why don't we say that he acted presidential? I think that might be their tactic there, trying to get back in and saying like, okay, we have to say something positive about this guy, so let's say that he acted presidential here, but let's not talk about voice. Let's not talk about the scary stuff that he mentioned in his speech.
Absolutely. And, he did wrap a very aggressive domestic policy in bubble wrap, and he made it seem much softer than it actually is. That was the tone. I mean, and that's what they're referring to when they say he became presidential. He just didn't sound like a total jerk-off.
Yeah.
In other words, is basically all they're saying. But it is interesting. I think that is getting a little bit blown out of proportion by those outlets because they want to maintain relevancy, and Donald Trump is choosing to go with other media brands.
Yeah, and you know what? Don't get me wrong here.
It's not like CNN hasn't failed us miserably in the past, by the way. Good Lord.
And that is exactly what I was about to say. I mean, the mainstream media has failed us, thousands of times before. The professionals have failed us 1,000 times before. But they still need to be in the room. They still need to be included. And if you say that Breitbart and InfoWars and these other alternative news organizations should be in the room, then everybody should be in the room. That you should also have CNN in there in the room.
Yeah.
You should also have the Washington Post in there in the room. You need to have a good balance in there. And all right, if you want Breitbart and you want InfoWars in there, put them in there. Let's give it. I'm going to give it to you. Put him.
Tell me about chemtrails.
Put him in there. But you cannot have a situation where it is only friendly people in there, but you also can't have a situation where it's only hostile people in there. You've got to have a balance, and these people cannot have they cannot have only reporters in the room that are going to give them softballs. And that also could be something that happened in the Obama administration. The mainstream media could have been a lot harder on Obama. They could have asked him a lot harder questions, and I'm talking about people like CNN and MSNBC. Of course, Fox was attacking him pretty hardcore the entire time, but a lot of times Fox wasn't attacking him on the right questions. Fox was attacking him for birther bullshit. CNN and MSNBC and a lot of these other outlets, they could have attacked him on very real shit. They could have attacked him on deportation. They could have attacked him on the drone war, but they didn't.
They chose not to,
They chose not to.
No, and CNN was busy, or Fox News, rather, was busy attacking him for being, the dictator-in-chief and expanding the executive powers. Barack Obama only signed 276 executive orders. I believe Bill Clinton signed 361, and then W signed 291. So W and Clinton both signed more executive orders than Barack Obama. Barack Obama is actually fairly in the middle. On average, it's been 100 a year. Or roughly 100 a year for most presidents. So, Barack Obama did not expand the executive office nearly as much as as Fox News would like. But of course, if they wanted to praise Barack Obama, they would have to praise him for his immigration stance and things like that. But as opposed to giving any coverage to it whatsoever, they just chose not to acknowledge it. And of course, the other two media outlets completely failed us, and most people in this country still don't realize that he is, deporter-in-chief. That was his nickname, and that was an accurate nickname.
I mean, I don't think anybody realizes that Obama was a fine president. He was not a great president. He was not a bad president. He was a pretty good president. And I think if we would have had more fair coverage on both sides, if we would not have had the left exalting him so much and the right demonizing him so much, the reality is that he was somewhere in the middle. And I think if we would have had more balanced coverage on both sides, that I think America would not have become so divided during his presidency.
Well, these media outlets, you can't trust any of the television news. I mean, CNN MSNBC, they're all sponsored by Northrop Grumman. They're all sponsored by, massive conglomerate corporations that have huge vested interests in our foreign policy.
Cui bono!
Cui bono. Holy hell. And now we've got to cui bono. Look who benefits. Northrop Grumman. Good Lord. It sounds like you ate a bad chicken. Oh, I got a case of Northrop Grumman.
I mean, all of these people have
Lord.
bills to pay. They all have masters.
Yeah, but I am a little bit sick of everyone talking. I'm not going to come to the defense of CNN. They failed us miserably. They've been failing us for decades. I mean, you go back and watch footage in 2001 after 9/11. Watch the Trump up to the war. Watch them just beating the drum of patriotism to go into a quagmire that we've been in for 16 years. Fuck CNN.
Yeah.
And fuck MSNBC. And I would say F Fox News. But I will be filling in for John Gibson this Friday. Fox News Radio. Check it out on Red Eye on Tuesday.
I'm going to go ahead and say fuck Fox News. Can I say that?
You can say whatever you want to say.
Fuck Fox News.
Well, you didn't really say it, but that's fine. No.
Sorry, my mouth is starting to give out.
That's okay. All right. Well, we better wrap. Marcus has a little tooth problem, as we mentioned earlier. But so the war on media and things like that, I think that it is partly true. There is no denying that. But I also think let's not lose sight of how much information is out there. For the first time in human history, we really have more outlets. We have more opportunities to express ourselves. This brings a different question of who do you trust?
Yeah.
And where do you look?
I mean, we've been trying to answer that question for 2 years now.
Well, it was so interesting being at this, liberal event yesterday. People talking about biased news, and everyone's like, Fox News is biased. We can't trust Fox News. Okay, that's true. But on the inverse of that, people say the exact same thing about biased MSNBC. They're both biased. Everybody knows they're biased. I think what happens is there's no institutions that have strong foundation, rooted in rock foundation, political foundation. But you do look at institutions like National Review. William F. Buckley, of course, a staunch conservative, but very principled, and he was rational. And if you really want to find dirt on Donald Trump, read Rich Lowry, read Jonah Goldberg. Read the conservatives who don't like Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Because they attack him on policy, and they go in. I mean, they absolutely cannot believe what he is doing when it comes to expanding the executive office, what he's doing with Russia, the anti-Semitism. Jonah Goldberg, of course, National Review was a conservative publication that was a never Trump publication. They did not. That was not to their benefit.
No,
it would have been a hell of a lot easier. My girlfriend who works there. I mean, she gets the phone calls because you never call the president of the company. Whenever these people who call National Review or New York Times, who are you? You're talking to. I'm not that she has a very high level position there,
of course,
but it's you're never gonna Buckley isn't gonna answer.
Yeah.
He's dead, but if he was alive, you're not going to get William F. Buckley on the phone, okay?
Yeah, I mean, I would love for there to be a true conservative in office right now because I really do believe in the balance of power. I believe in I believe in parties getting their turn. I think it's very good for the country when you have parties switching over because you have one. I believe in the push and pull, the compromise of American government.
That would be nice. Well, gerrymandering and redistricting have totally screwed over us on that.
Yeah, of course.
With Jonah Goldberg, this entire campaign in 2016, he was getting pictures of he has a young I believe she's an African American. I don't know what she's a person of color. His daughter, and he's obviously Jewish, and he was the memes and the threats that they were getting, the anti-Semitic and the racist rhetoric directed towards them, him specifically at National Review was absolutely insane. But they stayed principled, and of course they are a conservative magazine, so we know where they're coming from.
Yeah.
But at least they stayed principled, and so there are institutions. I believe the Nation on the left. I suppose you could equate those two.
Yeah.
They're principled. They're left, but they are not going to lie to you about where they stand and why they stand where they stand.
Yeah.
Although the Nation probably could have done a better job regarding Obama. I did see a couple of, coverages, covers regarding his drone war and things like that. But so those institutions, I actually find if they express a bias, but they're not hiding behind the facade of being even and fair and balanced, or CNN pretends like it's the most trusted name in news, or MSNBC is a little bit more on the nose when it comes to just we love liberals, and we hate conservatives. But so those I actually find to be relevant news sources if you go in knowing where they're coming from, and then you can sort of guard against some of the implicit biases that you'll be reading, but also you'll learn a lot too. And always go with if there's a liberal in office, read any liberal who has a dissenting opinion about that person, and vice versa, because those people are telling the truth, because it's against their brand, and they're still willing, to speak truth to power and tell the truth the best they see it.
Yeah, and I have so much more respect for people who follow principles and not people, because I think that's one of the problems we're running in right now is that people are following Trump. They're not following Trump's they're not doing it because they like Trump's policies. Right. I think a lot of people are doing it because they like Trump the man.
Well, we have a cult of personality. It happened under Barack Obama as well.
Exactly. The exact same thing happened under Obama. So don't try to say I'm not trying.
Remember that when they were like, Barack Obama's a celebrity in chief. He's a celebrity.
That.
Just because celebrities liked him, and then he's like, but he was never an actor. Like, we literally have one.
Yeah, if you Google celebrity, the first person that shows up is Donald Trump.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean,
it's interesting.
Yeah, and now Oprah's talking about running for president.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's like the office of the American president is turned into a celebrity reality show.
Well, I mean, I think that anyone should be able to run for president.
Of course.
Even a billionaire, Marcus. Even a billionaire should be allowed to run for the...
Poor billionaire.
But you don't... It's isolating.
Yeah, it's
when you can't... When the people are just like, can I have some of your money? And you have to be like, no, you can't have any. Serve me, poor person. It's isolating for them.
Yes.
But who knows?
It's very isolating.
Honestly, if Oprah was running in the Democratic... Oh, we didn't even get to that. Tom Perez is the new head of the DNC. He had a Keith Ellison and Tom Perez were the two main people. CNN did a Democratic panel. It was a debate to see who should be the new leader. I was talking to my friend Sina, who has a great show here on CCR called The Brighter Side. He's a regular fill-in for Dean Abdallah on Sirius Radio. Sina John, you know him, you love him. He said he's going to denounce his citizenship, his partyship to the Democratic Party because of Tom Perez. I mean, talk about a statist. It's total and utter nonsense. And if you watch I believe it was a ex-Kentucky governor.
Yeah.
He gave the rebuttal for the Democrats after the congressional speech.
The governor who just lost.
I don't know what the Democratic Party is doing there. We have a situation where the tail is chasing the dog. They need to get some principles, stick to them, and then let people come to you. That's what we've done here at CCR. We haven't really changed that much. We just said, we're just going to be ourselves, and people can come to us, and they can disagree with us or agree with us sometimes, but we're not going to sit here and change and chase everybody around, trying to get their political opinions and kowtow to them.
Yeah.
I like to say cowtail.
Cowtail?
Yeah, people made fun of me. I did it on the chats there, and I was like cowtail, and everyone's like, it's not cowtail. I was like, I'm from Wisconsin. It's all a cowtail to me, but a kowtow to what other people believe. We just don't have a party right now that is rooted in any fundamentals that can hold up to scrutiny, and it's really unfortunate.
Well, who were the Democrats trying to reach? Because I was watching the Democratic response, and I'm sitting there watching this old man in a diner in Kentucky, and I'm like, who are you talking to right now?
Literally surrounded by the cast of Get Out, the movie Get Out, but not the black kid. He was not. It was an old white diner crowd. I have no clue what it's because, of course, Hillary Clinton abandoned the white working class. In states like Michigan and Wisconsin, there was no Russian collusion in her horrible campaign. Those were all decisions made by her. So now the Democrats are trying to get back that base.
But that's what the Democrats don't get, is that they lost because they don't have any ideas.
Get ideas.
They have no ideas. There was no ideas of the Democratic Party. There was nothing but Hillary Clinton just being an old school Democrat on stage. All they wanted was like, okay, here is a Democrat. Vote for a Democrat. Whereas with Donald Trump, it's like, here's a man with bad ideas, but still, here's a man with ideas. Here's a man that's going to change something. And now the Democrats are just
policy,
doubling
but
down
ideas,
on that.
yeah,
he has ideas, and now the Democrats are doubling down on that, where it's just, here's another old Democrat that you could not give a fuck about.
Well, Lincoln Chafee had some good ideas getting us to the metric system. I thought that was a big political winner.
Wasn't he into Esperanto?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jim Webb, I don't know what his idea. I think Jim Webb just wanted bigger hats. so they could fit his head. That might work out for him. And of course, Bernie Sanders the only candidate with any
ideas.
I mean, strangely enough, new ideas. He's been saying them for 30 years.
I mean, no one was. No one's been listening to him. He had new ideas, and he also had principles.
Although I will say, Bernie Sanders, he's all over the place right now. I don't know. I have Bernie fatigue. I just feel like he's always wagging that finger at me, screaming at me. But anyway, he did give we talked about that Ted Cruz little conversation they had there. All right, well, let's see. So I think that's basically it. We got, we'll see if Jeff Sessions is able to make it. I did predict Chris Christie would be a part of the administration at some point. It is possible that he's not being asked to step down. Even Al Franken he told Jeff Sessions to recuse himself from the Russian investigation in the collusion with the Trump administration, the Trump campaign, but he didn't ask him to step down. We'll see how big this scandal actually gets. It's just one more scandal. Such a series of scandals.
I think he's getting out of it. I don't think he's going to resign. I don't think. I think what'll happen is that he'll probably end up recusing himself, but I really don't think he's going to resign.
And
if
he does, we'll see if Chris Christie gets in there or God knows who. I mean, there's so many people out there that are possible for the Attorney General. I think Chris Christie belongs in jail, and if he becomes the Attorney General, I think that's a total travesty. But that is what it is. What a week! What a wild week!
Yeah, what a week, man.
Well, you can all rest assured that Donald Trump knows how to read in public now. So he could read some good creepypastas, actually.
Yeah. Oh, he absolutely could. And if you want to hear Ben read some more creepypastas, go join our Patreon, our Last Podcast on the Left Patreon, patreon.com/Last Podcast on the Left. You're doing one every week now.
I did two this week. One was called The House in the Shade. And it was a cozy home, I think. Yeah, it was a very nice house.
But remember, those of you who are on the fence about Trump, I mean, this is what the plan has been. I believe that's what Bannon's plan has been all along, is come out with chaos, throw red meat to your alt-right supporters, throw red meat to your super right-wing supporters, have there be chaos for about a month, and then come in with a reasonable speech to alleviate the fencers, but don't get brought in by it, because I mean, if that speech was made by any other Republican candidate, it would be a fine speech, but it's not made by any other Republican candidate. It is made by Donald Trump. His actions speak louder than his words, and all that was words. So remember that.
Absolutely. And I do wish his actions would meet up with some of those words, because he did but the immigration stuff, what is a bad guy? I mean, these things, we're just going to be covering this stuff for such a long time.
Yeah, so. we really are. And also ask yourself, if you are a conservative that supports Trump, ask yourself, how's he going to pay for all this? How's he going to pay for the wall? How's he going to pay for the $1 trillion in infrastructure? Right. How's he going to pay for the paid maternity leave? How's he going to pay for the gigantic increase in the military that we're about to get, and cut taxes at the same time? How is that going to happen? Seriously, ask yourself that.
It does smell of the 80s, which, by the way, the 1980s, equating people are so much different now. Ronald Reagan appointed 2 pro-choice Supreme Court justices, which could just never happen anymore.
No.
He was so much more pragmatic than people gave him credit for. I mean, granted, he did some atrocious things for the country.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
times were not nearly as partisan back then.
They really
they just weren't.
Yeah. Personally, we can trace the homeless epidemic back to Ronald Reagan closing down all of the mental asylums, but that's a whole different thing. And the AIDS crisis, he turned a blind eye to all of that. But on the other hand, Ronald Reagan was, like you said, he was pragmatic.
He was pragmatic.
He was. The Republicans these days who worship Ronald Reagan only pay attention to about half of what I would say. Pay attention to about a quarter of what he did.
Well, he's just a deity, and they just place whatever opinions they want to place on him and say that it's
just like Jesus.
Like Jesus.
Ignore all the stuff that is inconvenient and go for the stuff that makes you feel righteous.
Yeah, and if you want to also, go back to the 1967 Mulford Act when Ronald Reagan was the governor there, that was a totally anti-Second Amendment act because the Black Panthers were starting to rise up and they wanted to disarm them. The Black Panthers were the the definition of the Second Amendment, a well-organized militia. And that was the beginning of the disenfranchisement of gun rights for black Americans in this country. It also goes back to the Sullivan Act in 1911 that happened here in New York City. That's a whole nother episode we could get into. Gun rights. And honestly, the racial divide between gun rights and the NRA is truly atrocious. There really are two different sets of rules for two different parts of society.
Of course.
So Ronald Reagan was pragmatic, against gun rights in California, and two Supreme Court justices who were pro-choice. It would be nice if we could get back to those times, but of course the prison-industrial complex absolutely ballooned under him. Starting with Nixon, and then Reagan, Clinton, W, and Obama, who tried his best, but what can you do? He didn't really try that hard, but to stop I can't even get in with the prison industrial complex right now. Okay, that's Marcus Parks. Find Marcus on Twitter at Marcus Parks and Instagram at Marcus Parks, and I'm on Twitter at Ben Kissel, Instagram at Ben Kissel1, and that's it. And this all goes to like last podcast on the left. That's our Patreon, but it also goes for like this show, because it's just Marcus and I. And then we can give Henry some. We'll pretend he's here.
And go to cavecomedyradiomerch.com for your Abe Lincoln Top Hat t-shirt.
Yes, absolutely.
And thank you so much to everybody who bought those. We really appreciate it.
Oh, my God. We've sold so many. And I get all the pictures on Twitter, and everyone looks so good.
Oh, yeah. You guys look great.
Yes. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
For more shows like the one you just listened to, go to cavecomedyradio.com.